I'd like to start with Richard Cordray, who announced he is leaving the Consumer Financial Protection Board. I'm curious what your reaction is, and what will you be looking for in a replacement for that agency?
Well, Mr. Cordray was absolutely spectacular. The first director of the Bureau, he did a wonderful job. He was all about consumers. He returned millions of dollars back to consumers who had been the victims of fraud. He fought hard. He was under attack by the Republicans, by the right wing all the time, but he was there to take care of consumers, and that he did. I certainly hope, and I wish that we could get someone to carry on the way that he did. I don't know who's going to be appointed, but this is an extremely important part of the Dodd-Frank reform. This Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is something that was put there for our consumers that they didn't have prior to Dodd-Frank reforms. And so he did a wonderful job. I am going to miss him. I worked very closely with him, and he did great for this country.
Speaking of Dodd-Frank, have you seen the latest Senate proposal for any kind of revision, and what do you think? What would you want to see in it?
I am not looking for revisions necessarily. I'm looking to implement Dodd-Frank and those reforms that are so extremely important. If there are places where we need to clarify things, where there may be duplication, that kind of thing, I am open to working with the opposite side of the aisle to do that. But I'm not looking to undermine in any way, destroy, or get rid of the central efforts that are being put forward by this Dodd-Frank reform.
Congresswoman, let's talk about tax reform. It doesn't look like we're going to have any Democrats supporting the bills, at least as they stand. So what do Democrats do in terms of tax reform? Do you have a voice on it? It doesn't seem as though you have much leverage on the issue. So do you just sit out the tax reform debate entirely?
Well, no, we don't sit out the debate. We're on the floor. We were on the floor last evening. We're on the floor right now. We're educating the American public about this tax scam. It is not simply tax reform. What you have here is something that's going to benefit the richest people in this country. Just take a look at the corporate tax rate, going from 35% to 20%, while in the lowest bracket, people who are paying 10% will now be charged 12%. Look at what is going on. This is not beneficial to the middle class. As a matter of fact, we just have information that shows that those who are making $75,000 or less will eventually have to pay more taxes. And so this is a scam. This is not real tax reform. Democrats are aware of what's going on. We're educating, we're talking, we're unfolding exactly what they're doing. And I'm hopeful that we will get enough members, particularly on the Senate side, that will help us to stop this tax reform bill in the way that it's going.
Well, certainly we will see. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll see what the outcome is one way or the other.
Yes.
Speaking of outcomes, Jeb Hensarling's term as chairman of the House Financial Services Committee is up next year. Do you have a pick for who that spot should go to next if indeed the GOP holds the House? And if not, if the GOP doesn't hold the House, would you definitely want that position?
Well, let me just say this. If I identified whomever I would like to see have the position, if it's still in the hands of the Republicans, that person would be in trouble. And so I will not talk about who my choice will be. But of course, we plan on taking back the House. And yes, I aspire to that position. I'm the ranking member on financial services, and certainly I would be in line for the chairmanship if we have the majority in the House. We're working for the majority, and I would look forward to the chairmanship that will help to implement the Dodd-Frank reforms.
The acting head of the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, he said he thinks Congress should consider eliminating the law that requires banks to be separate from other types of companies. Do you agree with that proposal?
No, let me tell you what I think about the biggest banks in our country. I think that they're too big. I think that we're going to have to look very closely at what we do to help downsize some of these banks. I do believe there's a lot of room for reform. Just take a look at Wells Fargo and what we're discovering about them. They have created accounts in their customers' names without the customers being aware of them. They have basically cheated their customers with having forced insurance when the customers already have insurance to cover their mortgages, and they're charging them additional money. It goes on and on and on. They're even repossessing veterans' automobiles who are not behind in their payments. Oh, and they just say they make a mistake. And they get fined time and time again. But we know now that's just the cost of doing business. And so we have a lot to do in the reform dealing with our big banks in this country.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you about the Glamour Magazine Women of the Year Award. You were honored there the other night. Yes. I congratulate you on that. But I'm curious about your comments as well. You led a chant, Impeach 45, obviously talking about President Trump there.
Yes.
What do you hope to achieve with that kind of talk at this point? I mean, we have the Mueller investigation going on, but let's say for a moment that it ends up incriminating the president in some way eventually. It doesn't seem to be wrapping up anytime soon. So why spend your energy on calling for an impeachment, for example?
Well, let me just say this. I have learned over the years that I've been in this business that there are few people who are willing to speak truth to power and to talk about what really is bothering our society and our democracy. It is not thought well of to step outside of that box. When I talk about impeachment, I describe what I think about this president. I think he's deplorable, and I think he defined himself in the campaign, the way that he mocked and mimicked a disabled journalist, the way he talked about grabbing women by their private parts, the way he called names of his peers, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's unacceptable. And for people to allow this kind of behavior to be normalized is beyond what I believe our democracy should be all about. And so I encourage people, and I inspire people, and I show people that you don't have to be intimidated, you don't have to be afraid, and you don't have to be traditional. You need to step outside of the box and tell it like it is. That's what I do. Everywhere I go, I say impeach 45, and I get people knowing and understanding that perhaps he should be impeached and focused on what he's done and the way that he's defined himself, his relationship with Putin, who he won't even criticize, and the fact that there's a belief that there has been collusion and obstruction of justice. It's all there. I'm going to talk about it everywhere I go.